Welcome to a new Inkscape beginner tutorial. It's almost Halloween, and to celebrate, we're gonna be drawing this illustration from beginning to end, entirely in Inkscape, in real time and step by step. And believe it or not, this is gonna be a cake, because I want to show you a unique method that's perfect for beginners that aren't entirely comfortable drawing. We're gonna trace, or should I say, Inkscape is gonna trace, all the assets that you see here, and we are gonna put them together and give it color, and do all the other creative parts of the composition. By the end, you'll be surprised by the power of these tools and how quickly you can come up with amazing results. The only thing you need to know to follow along is some basic knowledge of Inkscape. Here is where I remind you that I have an in-depth introduction to Inkscape here on the channel. That should be more than enough to follow this and all my other tutorials. Link in the description. Other than that, a like and a comment will be highly appreciated, and subscribe for weekly tutorials on Inkscape and illustration. Okay then, let's get started. First of all, since this is a full composition, I like to start defining the area where everything is gonna go. That's usually the sky. So grab the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle of any size in the canvas. We're gonna use the tool controls to specify the dimensions. I want an illustration that fits with the size of the video, which is 1920 by 1080, a common standard for video. So first go to this dropdown and set it to px. For some reason Inkscape defaults to millimeters, we want pixels. Then set the W input to 1920 and the H input to 1080. On top of defining the area of the illustration, this rectangle will be the sky. Make sure it has no stroke. If it has, just shift click on the first button of the palette to remove it. I want a sort of realistic sky. We'll need a gradient for that. Go to the gradient tool, make sure the gradient is set to linear mode and that it's been applied to the fill. And with the rectangle selected, drag from the top to the bottom in a straight line. A bit of a tip here. You can hold Ctrl while you drag to make it perfectly straight. The same when you move it around. Adjust the gradient so the bottom stop will be about 1/3 of the way down. Let's give it the colors. Open the Fill and Stroke dialog. Select the top stop. From now on, I'll be zooming into the HSL section to input any color. This way you can match my own if you want to be exact. Now select the bottom stop and give it this color. Very important. By default, Inkscape will remove the opacity of the bottom stop, so make sure to set the alpha slider all the way up to 100. We are done with the sky. Now I want to make the floor, which is gonna be a hill. Grab the pen tool, measure roughly about 1/3 from the bottom and make a shape similar to this, using only straight lines. Vary the size of each peak and be subtle. Don't move too much up or down. All shapes in the silhouette are gonna have the exact same color, full black. The first black swatch. Also, don't forget to remove the stroke. We don't want these straight lines, we want nice curved ones. To do that, switch to the node tool, select all the nodes on top, and go to this button to transform them to smooth. If you want, you can still adjust a bit the shape of the hill. Now we're ready to start the trace over. But before that, let's talk about how we're gonna do this tracing thing. We won't do it manually. We're gonna make heavy use of the Trace Bitmap dialog that you find by going to Path, Trace Bitmap. As the name implies, with this dialog you can trace automatically the content of an imported image. But there is a catch. I'm not gonna go into detail, but the way it works is different than what you think. It doesn't actually trace over like a person would. It's really difficult to get a correct line trace over what you see. So you usually use it either to get a very rough vectorized version of what's being shown on the photo, or a silhouette. Those are the two main uses. for why it works the best. And you can see for this project, we're gonna go for a silhouette illustration. But first we need some images. And there's a couple of things you need to know before moving on. First, about the images themselves. You can get them from anywhere you want. Google, Pinterest, even ArtStation. However, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. You could be infringing on some copyright if you trace from certain images or photos, so it's better to go for royalty-free ones. And second, I don't think it's a good idea to trace over other people's art. Even if you're being very transformative to the point the original is unrecognizable, it's just best not to go there. So stick to photos. My favorite pages to get free of charge and royalty-free images to trace over are Pexels and Pixabay. Both of them have a ton of pictures and stock assets that you can use for personal and commercial use without having to worry about infringing some copyright. There are a ton of other sites. All you have to do is to Google. But these two ones should be more than enough. The images we will be using will be from those sites, and I'll leave a link to each one in the description, though it could be more fun to find your own. And second, you need to know a bit how the trace bitmap feature works, because it will affect the images that you can use. It's super simple. Basically, it works by using contrast to define what areas of the image are gonna make up the generated path. This means that if there isn't enough contrast in the image between the elements you want to trace and everything around it, Inkscape won't be capable of singling out the element you want. For example, take a look at this photo. It may seem like this pumpkin is clearly separated from the background and that Inkscape should be able to make a clear trace over, but notice here in the preview that the fence behind is merging with the shape of the pumpkin no matter how much I adjust. And that's because the pumpkin and fence have a similar brightness. Now, sometimes you can edit the shape in Inkscape after it's been traced. We're gonna do a bit of that later on, chopping off some sections with a node tool or making up some other additions. But more often than not, the resulting paths are not easy to mess around with. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Also, if you're familiar with Photoshop or GIMP or Krita, or any other software that can edit photos, then this is a non-issue because you can always edit the photo to get the right contrast for Inkscape. But I am assuming that you're not familiar with that software in this tutorial. In definitive, the clearest traceable pictures are those that have a clearly defined silhouette, maybe a single object with a single color background. With that in mind, let's find the first element we want, the centerpiece of the illustration, the creepy tree. You can go to these sites and find a tree that has a nice and clear creepy silhouette. Just remember that it should have enough contrast for the trace bitmap function to do its thing. Or you can fetch the exact photo I used, using the links in the description. I would recommend against screenshotting the photo because you want a high resolution image, so Inkscape can trace better. To import the image into Inkscape is easy. Just go to File, Import, and then you go where you save the image. Select the photo and go to the Trace Bitmap dialog. We want the silhouette, and for that make sure you are in the Single Scan tab, and that the drop-down detection mode is set to Brightness Cutoff. Right below you should see a preview of how the generated path is gonna look. With the threshold slider, you can move and see how much of the brightness will be evaluated. Use the preview to get the clearest path possible. For this image, around 500 seem to work fine. All the other options are fine here. When you're done, hit the Apply button. And the path was generated right on top of the imported image. We still need to adjust a couple of things with this tree. It's not 100% ready to be used. Switch to the node tool and select it. Other than seeing a ridiculous amount of nodes, you may notice that a lot of them are inside the shape, creating some holes inside of the silhouette. Those were highlights in the bark in the original image, and Trace Bitmap detected them to be bright enough to not fill them. If we want a nice and solid silhouette, we're gonna need to delete all of those nodes inside with the node tool. It shouldn't take you too much time. Just try not to delete nodes in the silhouette, just the ones inside. Right here on the left, there are a few leaves of what most likely is a nearby tree. We obviously don't want that either, just select all of those nodes and delete them. I also don't like these leaves here in the middle. I feel like they don't fit with the illustration, so you can go in and delete those nodes as well. You may need to adjust some of the silhouette so it flows with the rest. And I think it's ready to be used in our illustration. So give it the same black than the ground and move it to the composition area. About 1/4 to the right is fine. Scale it so it fits inside and maybe rotate it a bit so it looks better. Take advantage that we are working in one single color and merge it with the ground so you get the best silhouette possible. A classic composition for this type of illustration is to make a huge moon in the back, creating contrast with the foreground and calling attention to the center. And since the moon is gonna be so big and the tree is so detailed, we're gonna need some photo to add detail as well. So either look for a photo with a big moon and with tons of details, or just get this photo from the link in the description. Import it into Inkscape, and select it and go to the Trace Bitmap dialog. This time about 400 seems to be right. By the way, everything that's shown black is gonna be the path, so here it is wrong. This has an easy solution. Just click on this button to invert the black and white so we get the correct path. We don't need to delete any nodes this time, but you'll notice that the generated path does not have the full circle, so let's do that now. Grab the ellipse tool and holding Ctrl, draw a perfect circle about the size of the moon path. You may want to change its color to a random one so you can see better what you're doing. Send it below the detail shape. You can move shapes up and down using the order buttons in the tool controls of the object tool, but I recommend you to get used to using shortcuts. And now adjust manually so it looks like it fits with the size. I'm not gonna give you snapping options that makes everything fit perfectly. Just grab the arrows from the object tool and make it fit as nicely as you can. Now for the colors. For the main shape, give it this color. And for the detail path, give it this one. Select both shapes and group them with Ctrl G. Move them to be right below the tree and intersecting a bit with the ground. Using the Ctrl key, scale it uniformly so it's about 3/4 of the height of the tree. I feel something is missing here on this moon. Maybe a nice halo around to make the whole scene more moody. Enter the group of the moon by double-clicking, select the bottom shape of the moon, not the detail, and hit Ctrl D to duplicate it. Give it this color, and send it to the bottom of the stack. Now with the shape still selected, go to the blur slider in the fill and stroke dialog, and move it to about 70 or so. It's up to you to experiment and see how you like it better. You can also select it by using the object tool, holding shift and scale it from the side arrows to scale from the center and to the sides. If you switch to the node tool, you can also adjust how much blur there will be vertically and horizontally, which is another way to control how you want it. Play around with these settings until you get what you want. Now I want to address something that has really annoyed me with the hills. The hills will look so much nicer with some grass texture. The problem is that without photo editing something, it's kinda hard to get a picture with enough contrast for Inkscape to generate a clear path. We could also search for a grass vector shape or even create our own, but that's not what this tutorial is all about. I searched in pixels for grass black and white, and the very first result was a picture of this cat on top of some grass. You got to get used to be resourceful when working with photos, so import this image into Inkscape, go to the Trace Bitmap, and set the threshold to be between 300 and 400. Click on Invert Image and generate the path. Obviously, we don't want it to look like this, so let's use a clip to limit the visibility to the area we want, which is the one that's overlapping the cat. With the pen tool, draw right on top of this area. No need to go all the way down. When you're done, select the two shapes using Shift, left click and set clip. This shape may not look like clean grass, but it's good enough since we will be overlapping it with the hill and we will be seeing it from far away. So let's do that now. Move it right on top of the hill and make sure it has the same color. Scale it down uniformly, so the width is more or less equal to the width of the trunk. Now duplicate it all over the hill following its shape. Try to vary the scale a bit here and there. Not too much, enough so it won't look repeated. Don't be afraid of overlapping the shapes of the grass, it still will read as grass. Remember that at any moment you can flip one of these shapes using the H key, and this will give you even more variety. And don't overlap too much grass with the bottom of the trunk. We want the most clear possible silhouette in the tree. And now I think the whole composition looks much better. I think something is missing in the focal point. Some extra bit of story. We're gonna add a few classic Halloween tombstones. Once again, finding tombstones that you can use is not an easy task. It's gonna take some research and experimentation, but I found the best possible resource in Pixabay. A few tombstones that are already separated and ready to be used. Link in the description. These ones are easy to trace. Just increase the threshold to only get the silhouette. But now, instead of being separated paths, they are all a single path made of different islands. This has an easy solution. Just select it and go to Path, Split Path. And now each island is its own path. We want to place this near the tree, so select them all and scale them uniformly holding Ctrl, so they are about half the height of the main trunk of the tree. And spread them all throughout. Add no more than 4 or 5 in either side, and rotate and scale them a bit so they look more interesting. If you want, you can also get creative, like I did here, and take advantage that you're working with silhouettes, and overlap the tombstones to get slightly different looking silhouettes. That's a really nice trick you can do with all other shapes in a silhouette composition. Okay, I want some flying bats as a final detail, and if you tried searching for pictures of flying bats, you see that they are either really difficult to find the right thing, or they don't look like bats. I mean, they look like real life bats, but we want cartoony bats with clearly defined bat wings. When searching for certain things, you may need to get a bit creative, just like with the grass. So I found this picture. This is not what you may think when you think of a picture of flying bats, but I'm thinking that we could delete the girl out and make use of the bats. So import this image to Inkscape. And by now you should know how to use the Trace Bitmap dialog. Generate the image, switch to the node tool, and delete everything that is not the bats. You may also have to delete some holes inside. Keep it the same black than before. We want it to be on top of the moon, so scale them down and place them on top. But don't overdo it, otherwise the area will look too busy. And we are almost done. But now I want some text here at the side that wishes you a happy Halloween. This is gonna be easy to make, but we have the problem of the font. There is no good Halloween font installed by default on your system. You'll need to find and install one. I found this site that contains free fonts for commercial and non-commercial use. Here you have a lot of Halloween fonts. For this project, I picked this one. Hit download and open the zip file with a program like WinZip or WinRAR. Windows should be able to open it as well. Then go to the locations of your fonts, which in Windows is Windows, Fonts. Here you drag from the location you unzip the fonts to the fonts folder. And that's it. Now you have to close and open Inkscape so it can find the new font. Let's continue with the project. Grab the text tool and write Happy Halloween. You can make it big with the font size or just scaling it with the object tool. Use the little diamond to make it fit into 2 lines. Also go to this dropdown and make sure this icon is set so the text is centered. Now it's time to select the font. Make sure to take a look at the name of the font you picked. In this case, it was called SHLOP, so I'll be searching for that name in the fonts dropdown. Give it this color for a Halloween look. And as a final detail to the text, I want to give it some drop shadow. Duplicate the shape and give it a pure black. Now with the arrow keys in the keyboard, hit the down arrow 2 times and the right arrow 2 times as well to move it slightly down and to the right, and send it below the other text. When you're done, select everything and hit Ctrl G to group it. Scale it more if you need, and rotate it a bit to the side. I think it works better like this. There is something missing here at the text, and I think some bats flying around would look really good, so grab the bats that are on top of the moon and duplicate them with Ctrl D. And move them on top of the text. Make a few duplicates, 2 or 3, and scale them and rotate them so they don't look like exact copies. When you're done, select the text and send it to be in front of all the bats. If you feel that the bats call too much attention and distract from the text, you can go for a more subtle color. Here I went for this one. And we are done with our Halloween illustration. Working with silhouettes is super fun, and tracing bitmaps allows you to make some really complex stuff super easily. I encourage you to keep playing with these concepts and experimenting and having fun. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I recommend you to do so. I'll keep making new tutorials like this every week. Also, a like and comment will help me a lot as well. I wish you a very happy Halloween, have tons of fun, and see you in the next video. Bye!